dark corridors, flickering VHS screens. The 80s were a decade when horror wasn't just entertainment, it was rebellion. Some films were banned, others mocked, and many forgotten. Until now. Imagine discovering you can watch these chilling time capsules for free, legally. From cult classics to strange experiments, each one carries scars of censorship, studio fear, and underground fame. Which of these lost nightmares will you dare to revisit tonight? Night of the Demons, 1988. When Night of the Demons first appeared, it was dismissed by mainstream critics as yet another cheap Halloween knockoff. But beneath its low-budget exterior lay a feral energy, a carnival of gore and gothic punk attitude that quickly made it notorious among horror fans. The story unfolds on Halloween night as a group of teenagers break into an abandoned funeral parlor. What begins as a mischievous party ritual spirals into demonic possession, grotesque transformations, and blood-soaked mayhem. It leaned heavily into practical effects, oozing prosthetics, eerie creature makeup, and shock-value kills that bypassed subtlety for sheer nightmare fuel. Controversy wasn't far behind. Many theaters refused to screen it, citing indecency and gratuitous violence. Some whispered that religious groups pressured distributors, while others insisted the studio itself panicked at the gleeful mix of occult imagery and teenage rebellion. In the UK, it fell under the notorious Video Nasties panic, briefly pulled from shelves before resurfacing in underground horror circuits. Behind the scenes, production was a grind. Budgetary restraints forced actors to perform dangerous stunts with little safety prep. Rumors spread that some cast members were shaken by the extreme makeup sessions, which stretched long into the night. Its aftermath? Cult legend. Night of the Demons spawned sequels, a remake, and endless midnight screenings. Today, it thrives on free streaming platforms, reminding us of a time when horror didn't care about approval. It just wanted to shock. Revisiting it now feels like opening a haunted time capsule. Part rebellion, part grotesque art, forever whispering that horror's true home is the underground. The House by the Cemetery, 1981. Lucio Fulci's The House by the Cemetery wasn't just a film, it was a dare. Released in 1981, this Italian horror gem brought Fulci's trademark mix of surreal imagery and gut-wrenching gore to audiences who weren't ready for its madness. The plot sounds simple. A family moves into a creaking New England home, unaware that a murderous presence lurks beneath its floorboards. But Fulci twists this premise into something uncanny. Dreamlike cuts, impossible logic, and lingering shots of mutilation that made even hardened horror fans squirm. Censorship dogs followed immediately. In Britain, it was swept into the Video Nasties scandal, its VHS tapes seized by police. Raids. In America, distributors hacked away at entire sequences, leaving fragmented prints that confused viewers even further. Some theaters refused bookings, fearing backlash from parents and church groups who called it filth dressed as cinema. Behind the scenes, chaos reigned. Actors complained of being forced into extreme makeup sessions without explanation, unsure whether Fulci himself understood the story's final shape. Crew members whispered that the director cared less for narrative clarity than for crafting pure nightmare logic. Its legacy, however, is undeniable. The House by the Cemetery became a cult staple, influencing filmmakers from Quentin Tarantino to Eli Roth. Scholars dissect its themes of family trauma and repressed violence, while fans revel in its unapologetic brutality. Today, you can stream it for free, legally, uncut and unrepentant. To watch it is to step back into an era when horror directors weren't just telling stories. They were testing the limits of sanity itself. In its silence, its shadows, and its sudden explosions of violence, Fulci's haunted house still whispers one chilling truth. The dead don't rest, and neither do the nightmares they leave behind. Demons, 1985. In 1985, Italian director Lamberto Bava, with producer Dario Argento, unleashed demons onto unsuspecting audiences. At first glance, it was marketed as another slasher film, but what it delivered was a surreal, blood-drenched nightmare that blurred the line between fiction and reality. The premise is meta-horror at its best. Patrons attend a mysterious film screening inside a lavish movie theater. As the movie on-screen depicts demonic possession, the horror seeps into reality. Audience members transform into snarling demons, and chaos spreads like a disease. The film becomes both stage and trap, as those who came to watch end up trapped in their own horror movie. Censors were horrified. German authorities cut it to ribbons, trimming nearly 20 minutes of gore. In Britain, it barely escaped the video nasties ban, but was heavily restricted. American distributors slapped an X rating on early prints, making theater bookings nearly impossible. For many, Demons was considered too depraved for mainstream release. Behind the camera, Bava and Argento leaned into excess. They cast models, musicians, and unknown actors, then buried them under layers of prosthetics and pus-filled gore effects. Production was grueling, long shoots in claustrophobic theater sets, gallons of fake blood, and endless retakes to perfect each grotesque transformation. Its legacy grew in whispers. Bootleg VHS tapes circulated at horror conventions. Fans marveled at the pounding metal soundtrack, the wild camera work, and the sheer audacity of turning a cinema into a battleground for the apocalypse. Eventually, it spawned a sequel and countless imitators. Today, you can stream Demons for free, uncut and fully restored. Watching it feels like stepping into the fever dream of 1980s horror excess, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters don't stay trapped behind the screen. Chopping Mall, 1986. At its release in 1986, Chopping Mall looked like disposable B-movie fluff. Critics laughed it off as teen schlock. But the film's gonzo mix of science fiction and mall culture carnage has since carved out cult status. The setup is pure 80s. A group of teenagers sneaks into a high-tech shopping mall for an after-hours party. But the mall has a secret. Its new security robots aren't just malfunctioning, they're homicidal. One by one, the robots unleash laser blasts, electrocutions, and brutal takedowns in a neon-lit nightmare of consumerist chaos. Censors and parents' groups were quick to pounce. Some theaters refused to advertise it, worried about its depiction of violence in a setting meant for families. Rumors spread that mall corporations pressured distributors, fearful that the image of killer security robots would spook shoppers. In Britain, it was threatened with classification bans before being trimmed for release. Behind the scenes, the film was a miracle of ingenuity. Director Jim Wynorski shot it in record time, working around the mall's actual business hours. Cast members were forced to run through smoke-filled hallways at 3 a.m, while robot props malfunctioned mid-scene. One actor recalled dodging a prop explosion that nearly singed his hair. The reception was lukewarm. It flopped in theaters, vanishing quickly into VHS obscurity. But over time, something shifted. Horror fans rediscovered it as a snapshot of 80s mall culture, part satire, part absurd splatterfest. Its title, once mocked, became iconic. Today, it plays to packed midnight crowds and streams free for anyone curious enough to enter its fluorescent hellscape. Watching Chopping Mall now is like glimpsing a funhouse mirror version of the decade itself. Neon, reckless, and brimming with paranoia about technology. The story vanished once, but like its killer robots, it refuses to stay dead. The Stuff, 1985. By the mid-1980s, horror often doubled as satire, and few films captured that spirit better than The Stuff. Directed by Larry Cohen, this 1985 cult oddity was a clever attack on consumerism disguised as a B-movie monster flick. Critics didn't know what to make of it at the time, but fans quickly recognized its subversive genius. The premise is deceptively simple. A mysterious white goo bubbling up from the ground becomes the latest snack food craze. Marketed as the stuff, it's addictive, cheap, and devours supermarket shelves nationwide. But there's a problem. It devours people too. Those who consume it turn into hollowed-out husks controlled by the living dessert. Imagine Invasion of the Body Snatchers remade as a supermarket horror comedy. Controversy brewed in whispers. Though not banned outright, censors were uneasy about its satirical bite. Some accused Coen of targeting advertising giants, while others feared its parallels to processed food industries. Studios panicked at its bleak humor and pulled back on marketing, leaving it to wither in limited release. On set, the production was scrappy. Coen used everything from shaving cream to whipped cream as stand-ins for the killer goo. Actors often gagged during takes, choking down spoonfuls of inedible substitutes. Special effects artists struggled to animate the stuff convincingly, resorting to upside-down sets and rotating rooms to create surreal sequences of walls and ceilings oozing with white slime. Though it flopped at the box office, the stuff lived on in VHS tapes and late-night cable, where its blend of satire and horror struck a nerve. Fans praised its anti-consumerist message long before such themes became mainstream. Today, it streams for free, rediscovered by new generations who recognize its biting commentary beneath the camp. Watching the stuff now is unsettling. It laughs at us while warning us that the things we consume, blindly and greedily, may already be consuming us. Slumber Party Massacre, 1982. What began as a parody of slasher films turned into one of the most notorious entries in the genre. Released in 1982, Slumber Party Massacre looked like just another teenage bloodbath, but its production history revealed something far stranger. Originally written by feminist writer Rita Mae Brown as satire, the script was hijacked by producers who insisted it be played straight. The result? A film that straddled parody and horror, often unintentionally. The story is textbook slasher. Teenage girls gather for a sleepover, only to be stalked by a drill-wielding killer. The imagery was blunt and shocking, the murderer's oversized power drill doubling as an unsubtle symbol of violence and domination. Critics dismissed it as exploitative trash, but attentive viewers noticed its biting undertone, a parody sneaking through the cracks of studio-mandated sleaze. Censorship was swift. Some theaters outright refused to book it, fearing backlash from parents' groups. In the UK, it came under fire during the Video Nasties panic, with critics calling it morally corrupt. The controversy only fueled its reputation, with whispers that it was secretly more clever than it appeared. Behind the scenes, the film was shot quickly and cheaply. Cast members later admitted the shoot was grueling, with long nights and awkward scenes. Director Amy Holden Jones, one of the few women to helm an 80s slasher, was caught between honoring the satirical script and satisfying producers hungry for gore. Its legacy grew with time. What was once dismissed as throwaway exploitation is now studied for its layered satire and gender politics. Sequels followed, leaning into camp and comedy. Today, you can stream the original for free, legally, and experience its bizarre mix of horror and subversion. Watching Slumber Party Massacre now feels like decoding a cinematic accident. Was it trash, parody, or both? Maybe that's the beauty. It leaves you unsettled, laughing and shivering at the same time. Night of the Creeps, 1986. When Night of the Creeps hit theaters in 1986, it didn't know what it wanted to be, sci-fi, horror, or comedy. That confusion doomed it at the box office. But over time, its strange cocktail of B-movie homage, alien parasites, and zombie chaos transformed it into a cult favorite, whispered about in VHS circles and celebrated at midnight screenings. The story begins in outer space, where a parasitic experiment escapes and crash lands on Earth. Decades later, in a sleepy college town, slug-like creatures invade human hosts turning them into zombies. At its center is Detective Ray Cameron, played with grizzled brilliance by Tom Atkins, whose iconic one-liner, "Thrill me," became a rallying cry for fans. Censorship wasn't its main enemy. Studio neglect was. Columbia Pictures gave it a minimal release, unsure how to market its odd mix of humor and gore. Critics didn't get it, calling it confused. Rumors suggest even executives walked out of early screenings, baffled by its tone. The ending was altered at the last minute, with 2 different versions circulating for decades, fueling debates among fans. Behind the scenes, director Fred Dekker poured his love of 50s monster movies into every frame. But budget constraints cut down ambitious effects, and the rushed schedule strained the cast. Some recalled working with unfinished scripts, improvising on set. Despite the chaos, the film found its afterlife. On VHS, fans embraced its camp, its gore, and its heartfelt tribute to B-movie traditions. Horror conventions later crowned it a cult classic. Now streaming free, Night of the Creeps shines as both parody and love letter, mixing horror cliches with genuine scares. Watching it today is like unearthing a forgotten relic, a film that failed on release but found immortality through the sheer devotion of those who saw its brilliance. The Video Dead, 1987. In 1987, The Video Dead crept quietly into the home video market with little fanfare. Made on a shoestring budget and distributed almost entirely through VHS rental stores, it seemed destined to vanish into obscurity. But its bizarre premise and raw energy turned it into an underground cult favorite, especially among horror fans hunting for forbidden treasures. The setup is eerie and self-referential. A cursed television set broadcasts a horror movie that never ends, but the ghouls on the screen aren't bound by fiction. They crawl out, invading suburban homes and dragging victims into a surreal nightmare. Unlike traditional zombies, these creatures were strange, otherworldly, more like grimy specters than flesh-eaters. Critics barely touched it, but whispers circulated about its disturbing imagery. Some parents' groups claimed it glorified violence inside the home, while others feared its VHS-centered premise reflected real anxieties about television corrupting children. It wasn't banned, but some rental chains quietly refused to stock it, especially in more conservative towns. Production was grueling. Made by first-time filmmakers, the crew improvised constantly. The special effects, latex masks, fog machines, and inventive gore were crude but effective, adding to its nightmarish quality. Cast members later admitted they had no idea if the film would ever see release, let alone develop a following. Over time, VHS collectors elevated The Video Dead into legend. Bootleg copies circulated at conventions, whispered about as the zombie movie that escaped the TV. Today, it's available for free streaming, restored from its grainy VHS origins. Watching it now feels like a glimpse into the late-night fever dreams of the 80s, unpolished, creepy, and strangely poetic. It's proof that horror doesn't need polish to unsettle. It just needs imagination and a cursed screen willing to blur the line between fiction and reality. Terror Vision, 1986. If the 80s were defined by excess, then Terror Vision was its horror comedy anthem. Released in 1986, the film bombed spectacularly in theaters but became a cult favorite precisely because of its neon-drenched absurdity. Where others aimed for scares, this movie went for Technicolor madness. The premise is both ridiculous and brilliant. A suburban family installs a new satellite dish, only to beam in an alien monster from outer space. The creature, equal parts slimy and cartoonish, proceeds to terrorize the household while feeding on television transmissions. It's part sci-fi spoof, part splatter comedy, and all 80s weirdness. Censors didn't know what to make of it. While it wasn't banned, many theaters rejected it, labeling it too grotesque for comedy audiences and too silly for horror fans. Parents complained about its satirical jabs at consumer culture, claiming it mocked television addiction at a time when cable TV was booming. Behind the scenes, the film was a roller coaster. Director Ted Nicolau embraced its camp, drenching the set in neon pinks, greens, and blues. Actors hammed it up deliberately, knowing subtlety had no place here. Special effects crews built elaborate puppets and goose-spewing contraptions, some of which malfunctioned mid-scene, forcing hilarious improvisations. Upon release, critics trashed it as garbage cinema, yet on VHS it thrived. Teenagers rented it for laughs, and horror conventions later embraced its campy energy. Musicians, filmmakers, and artists cited its neon aesthetic as inspiration long before retro became fashionable. Today, TerrorVision streams free, fully restored in all its neon glory. Watching it now is like stepping into a warped funhouse mirror of the 80s, where horror, comedy, and satire fuse into one chaotic vision. Its legacy? Proof that sometimes the movies dismissed as trash end up defining an era. And TerrorVision remains one of the loudest, weirdest reminders that horror can be both ridiculous and unforgettable. The 80s gave us more than cheap scares. They gave us mirrors of our own paranoia, rebellion, and cultural chaos. Some of these films were banned, others ignored, yet all refused to stay buried. Now they're free, waiting for brave viewers like you. Which one will you dare to stream tonight? Don't forget, like, subscribe, and share your pick in the comments below.